Welcome, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Glad to see all of you. Welcome, friends from Adat Shalom. And also, I see many people who I think are here to celebrate with David, and that's wonderful. We're very glad to have you. Shabbat Shalom. We just take a few minutes here of gathering and breathing in together as people come in through our waiting room. Feel free to send smiles all around. Shabbat Shalom. Greetings to everyone. Once again, just wishing us Shabbat Shalom. A few more people are joining. Welcome in. Send a special welcome to Carol Newman and Stan Newman are here today. Longtime members and friends who are going to be honored, especially today. Look forward to that moment with you, Carol. Die, 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 die. Just coming up to the start time, Rabbi Fred has put a message in the chat for us, guiding us to Asidor. We use Kol HaNeshama in our community, but I already see some of us here this morning have a favorite in your hands. One of the nice things about being part of the Jewish people is we have many different flavors, but we all come together in the end. Just want to give another shout out to David and Preston and Karen, looking especially wonderfully spiffy this morning. Mazal Tov to all of you. We're very excited to celebrate with you today. I'll turn it over to you, Rabbi Fred.
Okay. Whatever house we're in, even if it's directly nature's and God's house, it is a divine place. Page 141, or wherever your morning service starts. How good are your tents of this wonderful people. Ma tovu ohalecha, ma tovu ohalecha, ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. Ay mishkenotecha, ay mishkenotecha, ay mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani berov chastecha, avo vetecha, eshtachave el hechal קודשך ביראתך, מה טובו אוהליך, מה טובו אוהליך, מה טובו אוהליך יעקב. היי משכנותיך, היי משכנותיך, היי משכנותיך ישראל. Last line. ואני תפילתי לך, אדוני את רצון. אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. מה טובו אוהליך, מה טובו אוהליך, מה טובו אוהליך יעקב. היי משכנותיך, היי משכנותיך, היי משכנותיך ישראל. Page 151 and following, the blessings of the dawn, using various imagery for the Holy One. לשם ייחוד קודשא בריחו ושכינתהי, הנני מוכן ומזומן לקבל עליי מצוות עשה של ואהבת לרעך כמוך. Love your fellow human being as yourself. ובזכות זה אפתח פי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, המעביר שינה מעיניי ותנומה מעפעפיי. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, הנותנת לשכל ובינה להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, רוקע הארץ על המים. Now 157. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, פוקחת עבריים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, מלביש ערומים. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, מתירה אסורים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, זוקף כפופים. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, המכילים מצדי גבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, שעשה לי כל צורכי. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, עוזרת ישראל בגבורה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, עוטר ישראל בתפארה. 161. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, שעשתני בצלמה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, שעשני בן חורין. ברוכה את יא אלוהינו כעולמים, שעשתני ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו כעולמים, הנותן ליעף כוח. Channeling gratitude for our bodies, for our souls, for Torah. Page 209, the Psalm for the Sabbath day, Psalm 92. In honor of the many denominations that are gathered together, you may recognize snippets from multiple movements of the melody as we unfold our Sabbath psalm. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני מאוד, עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. And underlining the line we ended on, how great are your works, O God, your thoughts are incredibly deep. Ma gadlu ma'asechaya me'oram ku machshevotecha ma gadlu ma'asechaya me'oram ku machshevotecha. Hallelujah, ma gadlu ma'asechaya me'oram ku machshevotecha. Hallelujah. Nishbar lo tidal chesilo davina tzot before Hashem k'moseh. Yinecha v'ten kirugim l'voshikim. B'makom tishmana oznai. Page 211, the last 4 lines. Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yizgeh shetulim bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Verananim Yiyu Lehagid Ki Yashar Adonai Tzuri Velo Avlata Bo. Page 231, the last of the Psalms. As we look around, moving toward our minyan, celebrating with David, celebrating with Carol, with each other, celebrating spring, celebrating vaccination, moving forward, for all of the pain and the challenge inside each of us. May the dominant word of the day, indeed of the season, hopefully each day of our lives, be hallelujah. Praise be. There is so much magnificence in the world, in each other, and in us. Page 231. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, birkia uzo, hallelujah, vigvurotav, hallelujah, kerov gulo, hallelujah, 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 beteka shofar, hallelujah, 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 benevel vechinor, hallelujah, betov umachol, hallelujah, beminim beugav, hallelujah, betzilzele shama, hallelujah, betzilzele trua, kol hanshamate hallelujah, hallelujah, kol hanshamate hallelujah, 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 Hallelujah. Kol hanshama te'alelya. Hallelujah. Amen ve'amen.
Invite us now to turn together to the call to worship, rising as we're able in our own space, joining together to make this sanctuary in time and across our screens in the Kol HaNeshama Siddur, page 247. And I'll ask Rabbi Fred if you will make the communal response, please. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or Uvorech Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorech et Hakol. We continue from our seats. Sharing a word from Rabbi Rami Shapiro. As we watch nature all around us begin to tease us with the beginning of spring just about to open itself, on page 248 in the Kol HaNeshama Siddur, imagining God as cosmic housekeeper, pulling up the window shades, opening the doors to the morning light, revealing creative possibilities within each day. When we bring a sense of the holy to even the most mundane tasks, we become able to share consciously in the endless, perpetual renewal of creation's wondrous work. May we remain open to the creative sparks we find in those we encounter, in the world around us, and within ourselves. Join me, please, now on page 253, transliterated for us on page 255, as we celebrate this wondrous creation. Lai, 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 lai. גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו, המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה, זכות ומישור לפני חיסור, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו. טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יצרם בדעת בבינה ובחסקל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל ולהם זיו ומפיקים נוגה לעזיבם בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים במה רצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו צולה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אורה והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש אלי 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 Invite us to just take a moment and look around the screen. See at all the different faces that are gathered here this morning as like angels turning from one to the other, saying, I welcome you now to pray. I welcome you to make a song of praise and gratitude and gather with me, each one of us, gather together to praise creation. Page 269, Or Chadash al Zion Ta'ir, V'niskachu lanu b'mehera leoro, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. Turn ahead now to the verses that will lead us into the morning Shema. First to page 275, and it's our custom to gather those four corners together and say together, V'havienu leshalom erba kanfot haaretz, v'tolichenu komemiut le'artzenu, כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני. David, אוהב עמו ישראל, 277.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levacha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol meodecha, v'chayu hadvarim ha'eleh, asher anochi mitavracha, hayom al vavecha, v'shinatam levanecha, v'barta bam. V'shivtecha b'beitecha, v'liftecha b'derech, v'shoptecha uv'kumecha, v'shartam leot al yadecha, v'chayilu tafot b'neinecha, uv'tamtam al mizot beitecha, uv'isharecha.
Kol hakavod, David, beautiful. And we have a few moments now to reflect on these middle passages of the Shema, tying our love for creation with our own unique path as a people. And then as we're ready, joining together in the closing passages of the Shema. Just a few quiet moments now. And now join me as you're ready on page 285. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם לשום ציצית על כנפיהם לדורתם ונתנו למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Continue now, page 291.
תהילות לאל עליון, ברוך הוא ומבורך, משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לכנו שירה, בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא, תהילות אוסף אלה. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתחן ומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Page 295. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Sarah Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Rivka Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh Hakol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי כל חי ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה להחיות כל חי, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי כל חי. Page 303.
קדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמנו.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות מלוכו הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כמחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We continue the Amidah in the prayer book or in the prayers of our heart and join together for a blessing of peace. And as we come together, we finish our individual Amidas and join back together in a prayer for peace. I'm going to sing a prayer on page 321, starting at the top of the page, Sim Shalom. May God grant us peace and goodness and blessing. Sim Shalom Tova Uveracha חיים, חן וחסד ורחמים. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, 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 חיים, חן וחסד ורחמים.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much, Beth, for the chance to say the traditional words and also to pray an extra few moments on the possibility of peace. We're going to make our transition now from our morning prayers, sealing those prayers with a wish that all the prayers that are being prayed at this time for Shabbat around the world are heard by the place that hears our prayers. And now turn with great happiness to Preston and Karen and David to hear your blessings for this young man as he comes to the Torah for the first time.
Thanks, Rabbi. I knew this was coming. All right, well, today marks a very important occasion. It's the transition.
Sorry, can you come closer to the microphone or bring the mic closer to you? Thank you.
How about
We
that?
all want to hear your blessing.
Does that work? Okay. Well, of course, your mom and I have a few words of wisdom for you. Now, like the genie in Arabian Nights, we want to grant you 3 specific wishes, but we get to choose them, not you. First, we wish you strength, both the physical ability that you already show, but the internal strength to let you stand up for the things that you believe in. Help people less able than you, and help your family and your community. Second, we wish for you confidence. Confidence in your God, in your country, in your family, and in yourself. Support the things that you love, and be assured in your abilities. And finally, we wish for you a passion for justice. Do the right things for the right reasons, and help others get a fair chance to succeed.
However, with great power comes great responsibility. Temper your strength with compassion for those not as able as you are. Mix your confidence with empathy for those who do not see things the way you do, but are just as dedicated to their beliefs. And temper your passion for justice with mercy, as a second chance is one of the greatest gifts you can bestow on others. As a reminder of these 3 wishes,
We want you to have the tallis that I wore on my bar mitzvah. Wear it with pride. We'll say together on page 143, the blessing for the talit.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'achit ha'tev b'tzitzit.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Very nice. Leon?
Be'ana rachetz, lishmi kadisha, kadisha yakira, ana martush behan, be'ana rachetz, lishmi kadisha, kadisha yakira, ana martush behan, yachera ava kodamach, the tifali. Ibireta vitashli mishalim delibi delibat the whole amach Yisrael letafu hailim belishlam amen.
Amen.
Amen. And now, as we turn to page 393, we'll ask you, Preston, to take the Torah and hand it over to David.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gado Adonenu Gado Shemo.
Amen.
Gadlu Naiti Unaromema Shemo Yachdav.
Kol hakavod. Beautiful. And now, David, take your parents' help and lay the scroll back on the table. We'll turn to Rabbi Fred for some words of Torah.
Right. You can actually unwrap it at this point if you like, because this is a short introduction to chapter 11 of Leviticus that we will be reading together in a moment, with David reading lots of it, and we are so grateful. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week's Torah reading, Parshat Shmini, covers a lot of action and a lot of Levitical concern in many areas, most famous for the part we're reading this year, in chapter 11, the birth of the system of kashrut. What kinds of animals might we eat and which ought we not? It's an intensely personal thing for many of us. We don't like being told what to do. We chafe at that. There's something about human nature, certainly American identity, that chafes there. We also want to be ethical. We want to be intentional. We want to be part of a group. And kashrut has a lot that points in both ways. My most fervent hope for all of us as we think afresh about what we put in our bodies and what strictures we may choose to place upon ourselves for that, the greatest wish is simply that we all keep thinking about it in open and thoughtful and respectful ways, and that perhaps we keep shifting, that we don't land somewhere and inflexibly say, I now have the answers to these ancient conundra, but stay open. The priestly authors were very binary thinkers. Things are either pure or impure. The Levitical writers care greatly about keeping their categories neat and clean. Anthropologist Mary Douglas wrote a treatise called Purity and Danger, all about this, how to the categorizing mind, it's fine if things are one way, it's even okay if they're the other way, when the other is somehow something we can push entirely away. But it's those on the fence situations that cause such great worry and concern. Example, fish must have both fins and scales. So we get it. There's no sharks, there's no gumbo in a traditional Jewish diet. But what about the swordfish, which has scales as a juvenile, but loses them as an adult? Much ink has been spilled on questions like this. Modern Jews who simply reject kashrut can point here. The Levitical worldview seems not to be ours. What worried them need not keep us up at night. The entire approach may feel outdated. And David will soon regale us with a tale that likewise questions the rightness, the righteousness even, perhaps, of the biblical outlook. On the other hand, many embrace what we call maximalist progressive Judaism. Change as we must, but keep as we can, especially where the best of our ancient tradition calls us to greater fealty to our modern values as well. Isn't intentionality in eating a good thing for our bodies, for our souls, for our ecosystem? Wouldn't the world be a better place if we thought always about the provenance, even the sustainability of the very food that sustains us? Rabbi Maurice Harris of Reconstructing Judaism is our guest for 2 more weeks of the weekly Wednesday lunch hour Torah study, and author of a book on Leviticus. He shared with us on this past Wednesday that while the Levites, the priests, were not vegetarians, they also would be horrified to see the meat aisle where shrink-wrapped examples of horrific cruelty and unsustainability are on display by the thousands, and we are talking about sports in front of them. That is not the seriousness that our tradition asks us to bring to these weighty questions. At our sister shul Oseh Shalom, Rabbi Josh Jacobs-Veld actually has the Devar Torah in this week's Jewish Week, Washington Jewish Week, which writes similarly and is worth reading. So maybe the particular categories of Leviticus 11 may not be ours. Maybe we will change them as we go. But whether we think of it as eco-kashrut, eating local, slow food where possible, mindful eating, we should be moved by this passage to consider afresh this most basic embodied practice. One last approach to Torah, but also to Leviticus 11. I hope we all can embrace Torah even in the details at the metaphorical level. Sometimes insight comes from places we'd initially never guess, as befits a book that's been at the center of the Jewish conversation, even the Western world, for millennia. And a personal favorite example is from a list of birds that are prohibited that David will read for us. This is Leviticus chapter 11, verse 18. If you have a Plaut Chumash and want to start getting to the right section, this is on page 815 in the old edition or 713 in the new. Leviticus 11:18. So we're told all birds are kosher except for the following, and then there's a laundry list. And one on this laundry list is the chasidah, the stork. Chasid is pious. Chasid is filled with loving kindness. A chassid is someone who embodies, ideally, those traits. Nachmanides, a long time ago, explained that all of the birds that are forbidden must have some kind of cruel nature. They're birds of prey, and we don't want to bring that into our homes, on our plates, in our bodies. Whereas Rashi, just a few generations before, had explained in the name of the Talmud, why is the chasidah, the stork, so named as the pious, loving, kind bird? Because it is known for acts of loving kindness where food is concerned. Apparently, storks unusually, if they're flying by and see a fellow stork that is hungry or tired or ill, it will stop, forage for food, put it in that outsized beak and gullet of its, come over and gently place the food into the mouth of the potentially stranger, the cousin, the other. How do we reconcile these two traditions? Along comes the Kutzker Rebbe, Menachem Mendel of Kutsk, in the early 19th century, who explains the good news is, and this is why it's so called, the Chasidah is a model for all of us. We should all stop and be concerned for our fellow humans and do what it takes to make sure everyone is fed. But ultimately, it is not kasher, which literally means fit or acceptable, because it only will do this for fellow storks and not for spotted owls or swallows or sparrows. And so, to be righteous, we must take care of our own. To be acceptable, we must take care of others. The balancing act of universalism and particularism in one oddly named bird on one list of one set of animals. May there be insight for all of us afresh as we sit with the wisdom of the tradition, as we weigh its place in our lives, and as we reconsider again our relationship with the rest of the world 3 times every day in the sacred question of what we eat. Shabbat Shalom. We unfold just before that Leviticus chapter 11, verse 1. This is page 814 in the Old and 712 in the New. The story of kashrut. Vayazor v'egen v'yashia l'chol ha'chosim bo v'nomar amen. Hakol havu gedol aleinu chavod laTorah ta'amod riva Esther bat liba v'natan la'aliyah rishona baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato ve'atem hadvekim l'Adonai Elohechem chayim kulchem hayom. We are so thrilled to call Carol Newman our honored elder with an absolutely incredible story, as well as a titanic
They
influence
can't see you, Carol.
in the life of this
I'll move back.
community
They can't see you.
over the decades. Carol would stand by her side for the first Aliyah and come back at the noon hour after the bar mitzvah and our morning together to hear some of her wisdom. Thank you, Carol. Please.
Can't see you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok divrei Torah.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor alehem dabru el bnei Yisrael lemor Zod hachaya asher tochlu mikol habehema asher al haaretz kol mafreset parsa v'shosat shesa brasot ma'alat gera babehema ota tochelu.
Yishar kochech, Beth, and we'll ask you, Carol, to say the closing blessing.
Baruch atah Hamed melamed Torah lamo Yisrael.
Amen. 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 And a moment, Carol, to turn to you now to offer you a blessing at this important milestone that we recognize in our community as you reach the age of second bat mitzvah. It's a delight to turn our communal attention to you, to acknowledge the most amazing journey you've been on as a musician, as a healer and a therapist, as a beloved wife and mother and grandmother, and contributing community member. As Rabbi Fred said, we'll have an opportunity to hear from you directly at noon in conversation with Jeff Weintraub to get a wide angle view of your life so far. But for now, a blessing for you on this important birthday season. I wish I could reach out and hold your hand. Here I am trying. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואימותינו שרה רבקה רחל ולאה הוא יברך את ריבה אסתר בת ליבה ונתן לזמן יום הולדתה, כשם שהנחה אותה הקדוש ברוך הוא עד היום. כן ישמריה ויחייה ויאשריה ויוסיף לה שנות חיים וברכה. May you be blessed with life and joy and a gathering of many years of blessing. ויגילו בה כל אוהביה וימלאו כל משאלות ליבה לטובה. May all those who are your loved ones rejoice in you, and all the deepest longings of your heart be fulfilled for good. And we say together, Amen. Siman tov u'mazel tov u'mazel tov u'siman tov, siman tov u'mazel tov.
Mazel tov,
Siman tov u'mazel
mazel tov.
Mazel tov u'siman tov. Yehelanu, 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 u'lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, yehelanu, u'lechol yoshvei tevel. Yehelanu, yehelanu, u'lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, yehelanu, u'lechol yoshvei tevel. Mazal tov, Carol. And we'll stay tuned to hear more coming up later this morning. We'll
Can't wait.
Same for us. We'll turn now to our second aliyah to call Murray Sachs forward. Ya'amod Chaim Ben Allen Barbara Aliyah Hashniya to celebrate also a special birthday of a different age. Invite you, Murray, to say the opening blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
אמן. אך את זה לא תאכלו ממעלה הגרה וממפריסי הפרסה את הגמל, כי מלא גרה הוא, ופרסה איננו מפריס, טמא הוא לכם, ואת השפן, כי מלא גרה הוא, ופרסה לא יפריס, טמא הוא לכם, ואת הארנבת, כי מעלת גרה היא, ופרסה לא הפריסה, טמאה היא לכם, ואת החזיר, כי מפריס פרסה הוא, ושושה שסה פרסה, והוא גרה לא ייגר, טמא הוא לכם. מבשרם לא תאכלו, ובנבלתם לא תיגעו, טמאים הם לכם.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'alamed Torah le'amo Yisrael.
Amen. In the Zoom language, we're using adapted blessings, as you've been hearing when you're not in front of the Torah. Blessed are you, God, who teaches Torah to your people Israel, Murray just read. And with such credit for being part of a family where the teaching of Torah is such an important thing, but also the living of Torah in menschlichkeit and in communal involvement. We are so thrilled for you to have reached that metaphorical midlife moment. Moses made it to 120, and we bless everyone, Ad Mea V'Esrim, in health and in happiness. And we are so thrilled to call you up this morning at this milestone.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to being on the physical bima about a year from now for a special B'nai Mitzvah.
exactly a year from now, Parshat Shmini is the tentative plan. So we are very excited and thrilled to celebrate with you. Yasher koach. And I saw at least one child arm, so excellent. Rebecca, Lila, Noah, you're among your proudest accomplishments in these wonderful, productive decades. Yeah, Lisa, thanks. So we've read about how animals, land mammals have to chew their cud and have split feet, and then a handful of exceptions. And now we move on to the fish, and in the following aliyah, the birds. And we are turning now to the family. And so some combination, I'm not sure who's unmuting when, but I'm going to call all of you up, and hopefully you know the plan. This is for Bob and Shelley, and for Ron and Sue, and for Marge. Ye'amdu Reuven ben Herschel, v'Rachel bat Yosef, v'Reuven ben Yaakov, et Sarah bat Shmuel, et Marge bat George.
I wonder if we've lost Rabbi Fred for just a moment.
Here we are.
Rabbi Fred, you're frozen. If
Yeah.
you can hear us.
We've lost Rabbi Fred for a moment. Let's carry on with this special aliyah for David's grandparents. We'll be reading now Leviticus chapter 11, verse 9. Beginning with verse 9, we'll hear David reading and turn to you, grandparents, for the opening aliyah, for the opening blessing.
When?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you want us to go here? All right.
Bob, yes.
Please.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, v'halek b'yadav devir Torah.
Amen.
Et tochalu mikol asher b'mayim, kol asher lo snafir, because kaset b'mayim, v'yamim v'nechalim otam tochelu, v'chol asher lo snafir, because kaset v'yamim v'nechalim mikol sheratamayim, u'michol nefesh hachaya asher b'mayim, Shekatem lahem, v'sheketziu lahem, mimsram lo tochelu, v'nevlatan t'sheketzu, kol asherin lo snafir, because kaset b'mayim, sheketu lahem.
Yishar koach, David. Turning back to your grandparents for the closing blessing. Don't forget to unmute. Shelley and Bob, we've lost. There you go.
Okay.
There we go.
Baruch
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu. Whoops.
Whoops. We lost it.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Hamamed Torah.
Torah Lama
Lama
Yisrael.
Amen.
Amazing.
Amen, amen.
Amen, amen.
Mazal tov to these wonderful grandparents, all of you who are gathered, Preston and Karen's parents. We'll continue now with the Revi'i reading, and it's a delight to call forward as honorees Preston and Karen. And is there any way I could ask you to, yeah, we just want to be able to see you. There we go. Ya'amdu Pesach ben Reuven, v'Karen bat David la'aliyah ha'revi'it. And you can go ahead with the traditional Torah blessings.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirvanu lavodato v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Go ahead, David.
Bet Elef Teshaketsu Mina of Lo Yachalu Sheketsem Et Nesher Bet Haperetz Et Osnia Bet Ha'ah Bet Ha'aya Lumina Bet Korev Lumino Bet Bat Aya Ana Bet Achatamat Bet Hashacha Bet Hanet Luminehu Bet Hakot Bet Hashalaf Bet Hayanshuv Bet Hantin Shemet Bet Hakaat, Bet Haraham, Bet Hasida, Anafa, Lumina, Bet Aduhifat, Bet Atalef.
Amen.
Take your talit and dip it to the Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'Eloheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishar koach, David. And I invite you to scroll the Torah back together and just cover it for a moment. We'll turn now to a prayer for healing and back to Beth Sperber-Ritchie to lead us.
So we turn for a prayer for healing, and I encourage you, for those of you who are on Zoom with us, to put anybody's name in the chat that you're holding specially in your heart right now. So easy, of course, to turn to the many, many people whose lives have been affected by COVID. And even as we come out, or we feel like we may be coming out of Mitzrayim, of the narrow place of this past year, with vaccines becoming more available, there's still so many people who are struggling with the disease, our first responders and healthcare workers who are treating those with coronavirus, and just so many people who are in need of healing for their hearts for the losses they've had this year. And I see lots of names coming into the chat, and I'm going to encourage you to just hold a picture of the person that you're thinking of and praying for in your heart, a picture of them, you know, at their healthiest and at their best, as we sing together these words. The words are Ana Elna Rafana La and Rafana Lo. A healing of body and mind and spirit. A refuah shlema.
Thank you so much, Beth. Refuah shlema to all those who have been named and who are in our prayers today. We'll continue now with the final reading for this morning, Leviticus chapter 11, verses 45 through 47, the maftir for Parashat Shmini, and it's a delight to recognize David's tutor, Rabbi Betsy Roth, and I want to see if we can get Betsy on screen here. She is going to call David to the Torah, Rabbi Betsy Roth. I know you're here with us, Betsy, and we'll ask you to raise your voice now to call David. Don't forget to unmute.
Yamod, 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 Habar Mitzvah David, Ben Pesach v'Keren, L'Aliyah Maftir.
You're here. And now, David, you'll take your talit, dip it to the Torah, to your reading, and then begin with the blessing.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirvanu lavot dato v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Ki ani Adonai amaleh etchem meretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim v'tem kedoshim ki kadosh ani. So Torah tabihima va'ofel nefesh hachaya harameset b'mayim ukol nefesh acharaset al haaretz lehavdil bein hatamei ubein hatahor ubein hachaya hane'echelet ubein hachaya asher lo tachel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishar koach, David. Beautiful 3 readings. Now it's time for us to lift the Torah. So again, all who are able to rise, please. And we'll give David and Preston and Karen a moment just to situate themselves. Lezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. And I ask you to assist Preston as he sits down with the Torah. Transitions of all kinds are always the trickiest. So first, to wind the Torah tight together. That's it. Etz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchea meushar. Etz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchea meushar. Shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom, 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 shalom. Shar koach lekulam. So many new skills are being lifted up in all kinds of wonderful places. We'll turn now to you, David, to introduce your haftarah and then to let us hear the haftarah text itself. And you'll tell us what page we should be on.
Okay, today's top Torah is the story of Uzzah. Is similar to the Torah story of Aaron's sons, death at the ark. These both tell us of people doing something good but suffering anyway. I'll begin in chapter 6, verse 6, page 729 in the Chumash. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'neviim tovim v'ratah v'divrei hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai Avocher b'Torah v'Moshe avdo v'Hamet v'Sedek.
Amen.
Vayava'u Adon Nachon Vayishlach Uzzah El Aron HaElohim Vayoches Bo Ki Shamtu Habakar Vayihar Af Adonai Be'Uzzah Vayachehu Sham HaElohim Al Hashal Vayamot Sham Im Aron HaElohim Vayihar David Al Asher Farat Saunai Eretz Uzzah Vayikra Lamakom Hahu Eretz Uzzah Ad Hayom Hazeh Vayirah David Et Adonai Bayom Hahu Vayomer Eif Yavo Eli Aron Adonai Lo Avak David L'hasir Elav Et Aron Adonai Al Ir David Vayatehu David Beit Avedom Hagiti Vayeshev Aron Adonai Beit Avedom Hagiti Shosha Udashim Barat Adonai Et Oved Edom Vet Kol Beto Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Sor Kol Amim Tzaddik B'Chol Hadorot El Haneman Avahir V'Yotzeh Amdaber V'Kayim Shebol Dvarav Emet V'Sedek Nema Anatahu Adonai Eloheinu V'Anim Dvarecha Yidhar Echad Midvarecha Ahu Lo Shuv Rekam Ki Elf Mel Neman Rakaman Ata Baruch Atah Adonai El Haneman B'Chol Dvarav Rachem Al Sion Ki Beit Chayenu Olam Yisrael Toshia B'Mira B'Yameinu Baruch Atah Adonai Mesamech Sion B'Banecha Samchenu Adonai Eloheinu V'Elio Hanavi Avdecha B'Mira Yavo V'Gel Livenu V'Shiv Lev Al Banim V'Shiv Banim Al Avotam U'Beit Beit Tzivah El Korol L'Holamim Baruch Atah Adonai Avi Shalom Lad Al HaTorah Al Havodah Al Hanavi Ve'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh Shenatata Lanu Adonai Eloheinu L'Kedusha V'Limnucha L'Chavod L'Tifaretz Al HaKol Adonai Eloheinu Anachnu Modim Lach Arhim Otam Yitvar Shimcha B'Fi Kol Chai Tamid Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai V'Kadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yishar Koach. Wow, David. Wonderful to hear you in Hebrew so far. And you can be seated literally for 2 more seconds. And then we'll ask you now to come forward and share with us your Devar Torah, the words of teaching that you have developed in honor of this special day.
Today's final Torah reading was Leviticus chapter 11, verse 45 through 47. It includes the famous phrase, "For I, the Eternal, am the one who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be holy, for I am holy." It wraps up a bunch of instructions for dietary laws and the divine prince in the sanctuary. But my master does not actually discuss those things, which was fine by me because those details feel rather outdated. My mom here is more interesting because it tells the story of how man did the right thing despite the risk to lose his life, and it mentions my name David several times. It tells the story of King David's troops carrying the Holy Ark back to Jerusalem. This men had a huge celebration, but when the ark begins to tip, a man named Uzzah saves the ark. But in the story, God was angry at Uzzah because he touched the ark, so God smote him. Uzzah touched the ark only to keep it from falling off the wagon and breaking. Only a certain group of people were allowed to touch the ark. Uzzah was not one of them. It hardly seems fair that Uzzah suffered for doing the right thing. King David was very upset that God killed Uzzah and named the place where Uzzah died after him. King David was also terrified of the ark, so he left the ark nearby with the Obed-Edom family for 3 months. God blessed the Obed-Edom family during that time. King David was afraid of the ark, but instead of putting it somewhere where it couldn't be touched, he sent it to a family where it could end up killing them. This was not a very brave thing to do. Then, when he was ready, he took it back. This tells us 2 things. First, when God killed Uzzah for saving the Holy Ark, Uzzah committed love and sacrifice to the ark, even though he knew he wasn't supposed to touch it. Now, the real reason why God killed Uzzah when Uzzah was doing the right thing is hard to come by, but his sacrifice will be a symbol of what people are willing to do to protect a holy thing. Second, King David is kind of selfish here because he left a very deadly ark with an innocent family. But in the end, the very deadly ark blessed the family. When David heard the news, he took the ark back and had another huge celebration. How does this relate to today? Let's think about January 6th. Now, the Capitol building of the USA is a symbol of freedom and democracy in America. But got stormed by rioters who claimed that they were protecting the Constitution. The ones who are really protecting the Constitution were the guards and police who were stationed at the Capitol building. Like Uzzah, they protected a holy thing even though they knew they might be injured or killed. This represents Uzzah's incident in a different perspective. The guards who were protecting the Capitol building were like Uzzah, treating a holy building with respect and love, and they were willing to risk their lives. This story also tells us that our actions have consequences. In this case, 1 police officer and 1 rioter died at the scene. Others died later. The people who raided the Capitol building were arrested. We also see that leaders can be selfish and put others in danger to get what they want. King David put the Obed-Edom family in danger to keep the ark away from him. On January 6th, some of our leaders put others in danger to stop the election. Actions have consequences even if they're not directly affecting you. Everyone who participated in these stories had consequences to face. Some people are willing to risk their lives for the greater good, while some risk others' lives to get their way. The lesson is, if you choose the greater good, you'll help a lot more people. Let's remember Officer Brian Sicknick, killed on January 6th, while doing the right thing. And let's remember Uzzah, and let's stand up for what is right and what is holy. Shabbat Shalom.
As we just heard, I think a loved one in the room there with David, Yishar Koach. Wonderful, wonderful words. And David, you've taken one of the most enigmatic stories in the Tanakh and helped us see it in a way that might make more sense to us. Thank you so much. And we are so proud of you. There are a few people that are sharing notes in the chat, and we'll save that for you. Rabbi Fred and I have some words of blessing to share with you and your family on this special day, and invite the community to feel that we're all giving these blessings together to David and his family. There are 2 things I'd like to say to you, David, by way of blessing right now. One is, in addition to the story of Uzzah, the parasha in the Torah that you read from this week, Parshat Shmini, also has a most mysterious, difficult story within it, the death of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. Stories, both of these stories, which have confounded brilliant rabbis for many generations. And one of the things I would like to say to you today, David, as you come into this important new chapter in your life, is that you continue to be as curious and as insightful about even the things that are difficult to understand, because they will surely come to you as they do to all of us in our lives. We're constantly presented with questions and problems that don't have easy solutions, that don't easily make sense. And we need people in our world like you, David, who are willing to scratch beneath the surface, to look a little deeper, to be patient and continue to dig respectfully and lovingly, but inquisitively, and with your amazing, sharp mind. That's number one. Number two, this Shabbat stands between two important historical pillars in the Jewish calendar. This past week, the Jewish world observed Yom HaShoah, maybe the whole world observed Yom HaShoah, the commemoration of one of the darkest, perhaps the darkest period thus far in Jewish history. And we are able to do so now in our time with a sense of deep mourning, deep sadness, but also a sense of incredible strength in the knowledge that we are the survivors, whether we have direct ancestors who came through the Shoah, or whether we were living already in the United States or wherever else around the world, as we studied together in 7th grade earlier this year. You are part of that legacy of survival. The other big pillar, the other big historical pillar is coming up this week, Yom HaAtzmaut, the celebration of the independent modern state of Israel, with all of its magnificence and all of its deep problems. So also want you to feel that you are part of that continually evolving history, which stretches all the way back to the time of Aaron and his sons, to the time of King David, to the time of Uzzah, to the time of Mordechai Analevich, to the time of Ben Gurion and Golda Meir and millions of others in between. It is a delight to recognize you as a bar mitzvah today and to see you take your place in that evolving history as you bring your gifts to it. Mazal tov to you and your family.
Before offering you the final blessing from the tradition, to add to Rabbi Rachel's wisdom blessing about locating yourself in time, in the generations, I also want you to locate yourself in space and realize you have sanctified your home with the Torah. We're sorry that we're not in our communal home. Soon enough, we'll call you up there. But you are sharing with 150 other homes. I wish you could page through the screens from sitting back there far from the camera to see the number of people who you have enlightened, to realize that you are taking your place as a leader, as a teacher, as someone whose voice needs to be heard. And we are committed to giving your wonderful voice additional room to expand in the months and years ahead. But let this be a moment of celebration, of connection with people near and far, with people you don't even know yet, who share a tradition or a community, and with those who love you the most. This is a powerful moment, and you have delivered some powerful testimony, both in spoken and chanted word, to help lift us all up. We are grateful, and we look forward to what comes next. In the words of the tradition from the upcoming book of Numbers, folks are welcome to say, Ken yehi ratzon, so may it be, after each of these. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Ken yehi ratzon. And we say together, before singing Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, the blessing for reaching such a milestone. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach ha'olam, shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov u'Siman Tov. Yehelanu, 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 u'lechol Yisrael. Yehelanu, Yehelanu, u'lechol יושבי תבל, יהי לנו, ולכל ישראל, יהי לנו, ולכל יושבי תבל. Mazel, mazel, mazel.
Before we close our Torah service for this morning, we'll turn to the prayer for the new month, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the Hebrew month of Iyar, which begins this coming week, Yom HaSheni v'Hashlishi, on Monday and Tuesday. And it's been our custom, as it is in many communities, to take a melody from the upcoming month and use that melody to bless this month, to tie us to the Jewish calendar as a people. Iyar is a quiet month in the Jewish calendar, except for, as we just said, the celebration of the independent modern state of Israel. And we will have the melody from the Israeli national anthem to lift up our prayer for this new month. I just want to invite a reflection on the Hatikva for a moment, which says, Od lo avda tikvatenu. That hope is still not lost. That hope of a free and safe place for our people. And as we say in the Reconstructionist Jewish world, we consider that our tradition is one that's constantly evolving. Our theology, our culture, and even our hopes are still evolving. And so while the people who initially penned that beautiful national anthem had their own set of hopes, their own needs for their own time, we in our time can still say those words, Od lo avda tikvatenu. This hope is not lost. It's still yet to come. Only our version of it would hopefully mean, I would say, I hope we all mean, that it's for a modern, independent state of Israel that in fact lives up to its own Declaration of Independence, which calls for a place that will foster the development of all its inhabitants, be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as visioned by the prophets of Israel, and will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex, and guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. So as we find our own way to our own prayers for this new month, let us also hold on to our beloved state of Israel, still finding its way to its potential. Join me on page 425 in the Siddur. It's a custom to rise for this prayer as we're able. Let's take a second of quiet here. Turn inward and see what prayers are rising within us. Prayers for this coming month. And then turn those intentions towards the words on page 425. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu v'imotenu shetechadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh letova v'livracha v'titen lanu chaim arukim חיים של שלום, חיים של טובה, חיים של ברכה, חיים של מזון ופרנסה, חיים של חילוץ עצמות, חיים שיש בהם אהבה ויראת שמיים, חיים שאין בהם בושה וכלימה. חיים של אושר וכבוד, חיים שיש בהם יושר ותבונה והשכל ודעה, חיים שימלאו משאלות ליבנו לטובה. Amen. Selah 427. מי שעשה ניסים לאבותינו לאמותינו וגאלותם מעבדות לחירות, הוא יגאל אותנו בקרוב יקבץ נידחנו מארבע כנפות הארץ. חברים כל ישראל, חברים כל ישראל, חברים כל ישראל, חברים כל ישראל, ונאמר אמן. ראש חודש אייר יהיה ביום השני ושלישי, הבא עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל לטובה. יחד שהוא הקדוש ברוך הוא עלינו ועל כל יושבי תבל, לחיים ולשלום, לששון ולשמחה, לישועה ולנחמה, ונאמר אמן, amen. May the Blessed Holy One renew this month and for all who dwell on earth, for life and for peace, for joy and for happiness, for salvation and for rest. And we all say, amen. Let's turn together now to page 441 to close the Torah service. Join me, please, David and everyone. Eitz chaim hi lamachzikim ba v'tomchea meushar derachea darchei noam v'chol netivotea shalom. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh chadesh yamenu chadesh yamenu kekedem. We can be seated. We'll turn first in our closing blessings, our closing prayers to the Kaddish Yatom. And I ask for an extra moment here as we've just come through this past week, as we mentioned, Yom HaShoah. And I want to thank Claude Kaxer for reminding us this coming Sunday, the Washington area Jewish community commemoration sponsored by the Jewish Community Relations Council this coming Sunday. We had the opportunity this past week to turn to our own member, Howard Milchberg, to share the extraordinary stories of his father, Irving's survival. I'd like to just ask for a moment here. There are, of course, fewer and fewer survivors with us anymore. But anyone who's in our community today, if you would just in the chat, if you're comfortable to do so, say the name of if there's someone in your family who survived, so we can acknowledge those names, inviting us to share the memory of people who lived through the Holocaust and those who died in it, who are directly tied to our community. Just give a moment as those names appear here. And we say, as we always do, in the memory of those who came before us, may those memories be for blessings, for strength, and for inspiration. And now to turn to those in our own community who are mourning or who are observing a yortzeit. We want to acknowledge Michelle Daston Van Ryn, who is remembering her mother, Ruth Elaine Goldstein Daston, and to Lauren Randall, remembering her mother, Elaine Randall, both just coming into the end of Shloshim, the end of that first month. And also those observing a yortzeit this week, Rosalie Cogan's mother, Natalie Morrison, Karen Fierce's grandmother, Emily Boyers, Harvey Iglarsh's father, Reuben Iglarsh, Deb Posner's mother, Carol Pally Samuels, Steve Sharp's brother, Barry Sharp, Sharon Bray's grandmother, Billy Tenenbaum, Tammy Jarrell's mother, Judith Wendrow, Philip Brunel's mother, Rose Brunel, Rosalie Gross's mother, Kate Miller Finkelstein, Adrian Olek's aunt, Estelle Olek, Betsy Reinstein, Dewey's mother, Evelyn Reinstein, Jason Maxstein's grandfather, and Neil's father, Floyd Maxstein, Ethan McMahon's nephew, Seth Zicko, Marla Zippin's grandmother, Martha Harris, Frank Nider's father, Bailey Nider, Carol Stern's grandfather, Morris Sobel, Howard Task's uncle, Harold Gorshman, Jody Green's father, Stanley Green, Donald Kane's father, Elmer Kane, Ted Kleinman's father, Alexander Kleinman, and of course acknowledging Ellie's grandfather, Joan Bacharach's mother, Ilsa Bacharach, Dina Goldsmith's grandmother, Esther Green, Joseph Mellinger's mother, Marcia Mellinger, Hal Greenwald's mother, Anita Greenwald, and Darren Schoenzeit's grandmother, Rose Schoenzeit. Ask anyone in the community today who is in mourning or observing a yortzeit to please stand. And I'll make an extra invitation today, once we pass through the communal verse in the middle of the Kaddish, others who would like to stand in memory of those who perished in the Shoah to join in as well. But first, to begin with those who we've just named. Page 451, Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chaim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. Zichronam livracha. We'll turn back now to page 445 and turn back to you, David, to lead us in our closing Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabbat l'adon ha'kol l'tet gedula yotzer b'reishi shenatan lanu Torah temet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu v'anachnu korim u'mishabtachim u'modim lifnei melech malchei amalim akadosh baruch hu shehu noten shamayim yotzer haaretz Umosha Yakaro Bashamayim all Ushi Natuzo, Megore Miro me, U Eloheinu Ainos, Emet Malkenu, Evet Sulato Kakatu, Urto, Ea Ayom, Asho, Elavachecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim Bashamayim all. El Haaretz Mitzameach Ein Od Yakatu Berotecha Al Naimach Milam Ba'ed Benemar V'Chaya Adonai L'Melech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad
Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad. We end with the vision of oneness. And thank you, David, for helping advance that vision with your teaching and your leadership today. We are so thrilled to celebrate with you. And again, Mazal Tov as well to Carol, who did this 7 decades ago and gets another opportunity to share story. Soon we will break up into breakout groups. We sometimes call them breakthrough groups. Imagine that you had just gotten your plate of oneg food and we're celebrating, and because there's too many people right now around the plouses, you just take a seat at any table and a bunch of random people welcome you. That's what we're going for in these next 12 or 15 minutes. Make sure everyone has a chance to check in and just share how their week is and what today has meant to them, and anything else that's current. And we will come back together around noon on the dot for Carol Newman's incredible story. So with gratitude to everyone who has been part of this service, our Zoom Gabayim behind the scenes, Beth for leading so much of the davening, and so many others. We turn to Scott Arnold on behalf of our board for a word of greeting.
Thank you, Fred. And thank you for leading the wonderful service along with Rabbi Rachel and Beth. And a hearty mazel tov again to David and Preston and Karen and the entire Plouse family, and to Carol Newman, who I'm looking forward to learning even more about. I know you all keep up with social solidarity, keep doing it to learn what's going on, including special events for Holocaust Remembrance Day tomorrow and many other things. Shabbat Shalom.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Lots to look ahead to. Again, Yom HaAtzmaut this coming week, and a celebration with our former Shaliach Idan back in Israel at this hour, the noon hour next week, along with an incredible service with our guest friend and regular visitor, Micah Hendler, not to be missed. So much to look forward to. David, if you've got a Kiddush cup nearby, we're going to give you the last word. At the end of Kiddush, which you'll find on page 465 in the prayer book, we're going to head to those breakout rooms, all including the guests for the Plouse celebration are welcome to join us for that or not, as you see fit. And we'll come back together at noon, and the Plouses deserve a great celebration to follow. Page 465, bless us.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dor kari olam Ben Yuvin b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dor kari olam Ki sheshet yamin asaonai et hashamayim vet ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dor kari olam V'yom ha'shavi Shabbat v'nefesh, Shabbat v'nefesh, Shabbat v'nefesh. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדור דורי עולם. על כן ברכוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו. תבריא אברי לחיים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. אמן.
Yay, yay, yay! Mazal Tov, David, Karen, Preston, and all who are here to celebrate with them. With enormous thanks to our Gabayim, Shelley Sadowski and Matt Wald, we'll ask you to turn us over now into our breakthrough room so we can greet each other and then come back at noon to talk with Carol Newman and Jeff Weintraub.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hi, Carol. I think I see you not on video, but I just want to make sure you're on and just check to make sure that your sound is good. If you want to log in, or you're logged in, but if you can just maybe put your camera on right now, Carol.
Hi, Jeff. I hear you clearly.
Okay, good. Is it too loud, Matt? Or it's okay. All right.
It's fine.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna cruise the breakout rooms here. I'll be back.
Hi, Carol. If you're on and in front of the computer right now, if you want to unmute so we can just check your sound and maybe turn on your video so we can make sure you look good. Now would be a good time. Carol and Stan.
This was a great.
I'm gonna, can you hear me, Jeff?
Yeah, there's some noise in the background, but I can hear you.
Gotta turn that on.
Hey, God bless the technology.
She's got two things on.
So you need to turn that off.
Across the world.
I'm getting ready to end the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Carol and Stan, you want to turn on your camera?
Yeah, please don't turn your
Can
camera.
you hear me?
Yes,
We
Carol, we hear
can.
you. Can you turn on your camera?
Well, wait a second. What I want to say is, I was going to do it on my laptop, and I just turned on. I have my iPad, and you're on my iPad, but I'm in a breakout room now, and I wanted to switch it. I thought I would switch it to my when you enter the breakout rooms, I think it's going to come on my laptop.
Okay.
And that's working. If it isn't, I'll switch it to this iPad.
Why don't you leave the breakout room right now? There's a
Can I
button.
can I
There's
do
a button
that?
you can push.
All right,
So
hold on.
Yeah.
I have to see if I can do it.
Breakout
sure you
rooms are
can.
closing in 45 seconds.
Technology can be sometimes. I'm deeply, deeply
Yeah, get out of the
grateful
breakout room.
for it.
There must be a way of leaving. I think so. Good. Returning to. Oh,
And then-
Carol and Stan.
Yeah, you have to mute the other device, Stan, or you're going to get that echo.
Wait a second. Wait a second.
So you're on two different things. If you're on your iPad, which I think says Carol and Stan, mute that. Yeah. I mean, mute the sound coming out of it or turn it all the way down. Otherwise, you're going to get that echo.
Can you hear us?
Everyone, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We can.
Okay, now we're back. We're back in.
You're
was a
back
little
in
confusing.
the big room.
Yeah.
And welcome back.
It was a
Welcome
little
back,
confusing.
everyone. Good to have a few minutes to chat about current events as we were doing in my breakthrough room, or personal events, whatever's happening.
Okay.
As we explained earlier, I think everybody here knows what's on tap now, but just in case, this is the grand finale for this year's season of honoring our elders. We've had 3 marvelous exemplars with us, and just want to acknowledge Myrna Tech, Ted Kleinman, and today Carol Newman. And in just introducing her, I want to send a heartfelt gratitude to Audrey Lyon, who has been behind the scenes coordinating all of this, encouraging, training Jeff to be the interviewer that he is, marvelous interviewer. So Audrey, really grateful to you for all of your wonderful handling of this beloved project of ours. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Weintraub and to Carol Newman. We're going to talk today and really listen and wrap up right about 12:30.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rabbi Rachel. For those of you who haven't participated in these before, and I suspect, Carol, you have some friends and family who are joining us maybe for the first time for one of these, we're going to be speaking with Carol for about 25 minutes or so, maybe 30 minutes. And she's going to tell us about her life, her 83 years of life in about a half an hour. So we will be moving swiftly and just really clipping the very tops of all the stories, but moving it along. And then if there's some questions that people want to put into the chat, I'll read them back to her, and we will learn a lot. Carol, thank you so much for submitting to this. And I hope the process has been joyful for you to reconsider all the things that have happened in your life and reflect on them, and to share that with all of us. We've really enjoyed your presence and Stan's presence in the congregation, but not everybody maybe has heard your story. I know there's certainly some things that you told me that I was not aware of. And it's always great to learn from somebody with such experience. And so thank you. And I also want to acknowledge, I know your son, Bobby is on. I believe I saw something, and
My
I'm not-
daughter Jordana.
and Jordana. I was there. She is. Okay, good. So if the two of you are so inclined, and I'm not putting you on the spot, if you have a couple of words to say, maybe near the end, about your mom, for a couple of minutes, we'd welcome that as well. And
I have something to say.
and I suspect
I'll
Stan
ask
will have
you.
something to say too. Right. So anyway, Carol, what's one of the, I think, dominant themes in your life, especially your early life, is New York City. You grew up in New York City. It was the place that you grew up in, where your family was, where you went to school, primary school, and even undergraduate and graduate school. Tell us a little bit about your experience growing up in New York City, what it kind of meant to you, what part of the city, I forgot to ask you about that, what part of the city you grew up in, and your maybe your grade school experience coming up. What was that like? What stands out for you?
Well, I was very much of a confirmed New Yorker.
Yeah.
I saw no reason to live anywhere else. And so actually, when Stan was offered a job in Washington, and I was in graduate school at that point for my doctorate at NYU, which was a fabulous program, and I had to give it up, it was a big deal for me to move. And we only came for 2 years, really. But somehow we loved it so much, we never went back. We had sublet our apartment with our pet bunny boy. Unfortunately, Bunny Boy died while we were gone because we couldn't bring him, and the renters somehow said he died. And so,
tell us a little bit about your
but my
grade
high school,
experience.
the high school of
High
music
school.
and art where I went was absolutely fantastic. You go in either as a music or an art student. As a music student, if you go in on piano, they give you another instrument, or you take voice. And I started cello there. The school has like 4 full orchestras, 2 string orchestras, bands, in addition to choruses, and the art students are fabulous. And so that was an absolute highlight. I think my parents were actually president of the Parent Teacher Association my last year there. My father was a very fine violinist, and he used to play kind of in like a musical salon. I grew up on the west side of Manhattan, and my father played chamber music every week. My mother was a very good pianist, and we actually occasionally had a trio, which is they wanted me to do the cello, so we'd have a family trio, but we didn't play that much. But growing up in New York was just fabulous. But I grew up on the 12th floor, and I never had a tree outside my window. And one of the things that I loved about Washington was the first time I had a tree outside the window. And even though that's many, many years ago, I still haven't gotten over having a tree outside the window. And then after music and art, I went to Barnard, which was also a wonderful school. After that, I got my master's at City College, and then I went to NYU, but I ended up finishing up when we moved to Washington. I finished my PhD at University of Maryland in the psychology department.
So what, by the way, we should note that you found out many, many years later that music and arts high school, one of your classmates was Miriam Eisenstein.
Yeah, I think we were in orchestra at the same time, senior orchestra.
Right. But you didn't know her at the time.
I didn't know it at the time, but I knew Miriam's cousin, Paula Eisenstein, who played the cello also. And she was in the cello section with me. She now lives in Texas.
Right. And also that you grew up in a building with a notable relative of Miriam Eisenstein. Right.
Yes. I grew up, Mordecai Kaplan was in my building. So I used to see him on the elevator. He wasn't particularly friendly to me. But the one thing I knew about him is that my mother said he was excommunicated from synagogue. So that kind of intrigued me, but I was too young to have any kind of conversation. But it's interesting that I've had through my life, I've had contacts with very famous people, like Heschel, for example. Well, I had many summer vacations in Westport, Connecticut. And Heschel, my parents were good friends with Heschel, and they did go to Passover Seder at his house. And Heschel used to sit on the beach smoking big cigars.
And
And
his
then we
wife,
stayed. And then also when I came, we had a year in Europe. And then when we came back, we stayed at, we were close friends with Art Waskow and Irene Waskow.
okay.
And we lived at their house for about 3 months until we found a house to rent.
But quickly
So-
going back to Heschel, his wife Sylvia was a
Yes,
close
his
friend of your
wife
mother's, and
Sylvia was
she
a
was
close
also an
friend of my
accomplished.
mother's.
She was also an accomplished pianist too. And
Right, she was
like
an
your mother.
accomplished pianist. And my mother, after she retired from the business that she and my father ran, my mother was giving lectures on music. And so she would lecture and she'd have Sylvia come up and play the piano. She would choose they would choose certain works that fit into the lecture. So she and Sylvia were really good friends, and Sylvia had a lot to my mother's life as well.
So you went to Barnard. What did you study at Barnard, and what
I
was your interest in?
I majored in psychology, and
Okay.
the head of the school was married. She had a doctorate, and she was inspiring to all of us, because if she could have an important career and work, then so could we. And I was told also that to be a psychologist, you had to have a doctorate. So I went and got a doctorate. And
what about psychology, clinical psychology attracted you? Why did you choose that direction?
Well, I've always been interested in what people take. I've always been interested in people and their backgrounds and why they think and do and feel and act as they do. So it fit in. I was an only child, but I had a very close friend, Dottie, and during freshman year of college, she made a suicide attempt. And so I used to go over every morning for a period of time, early in the morning, to kind of get her up, because she was so depressed she didn't want to get up. And then her father would drive the two of us to Barnard. And I went on to Barnard. And I've continued my interest in psychology, and I guess I always wanted to do psychotherapy, and I'm still doing it. I'm not taking new patients at this point. I'm kind of more finishing up with the patients that I have, but it's been hard to retire because I love my work. I absolutely love it. I love seeing patients. I love helping people. And so it's kind of hard to give it up. And Stan's been asking me to retire for a long time. And I was supposed to retire December, but it didn't work out. So,
and tell us a little bit about what your focus has been throughout your clinical psychology practice.
Well, I work with anxiety and I work with depression. I do hypnosis. I trained in hypnosis, and that's been wonderful. And it happens to be extremely good with phobias. And it tends to work fairly quickly. It's efficient and it's very good. But I use it for a lot of other things, for habit control, and it's very helpful in psychotherapy.
Right. And so that's been your focus for most of the time. So you were at Barnard and you were swept off your feet by a dashing young, newly minted Columbia Law School student by the name of Stan Newman. And
yes, we met at a Barnard Columbia mixer, as a matter of fact, at Barnard. I got engaged during junior year. I think I was around 18 when I graduated college at 20, and I graduated. He graduated law school at Columbia when I graduated Barnard, and then he had to take the bar, and so we got married right after the bar. He took the bar, I think, on July 1st and 2nd, and we got married on July 4th. So, given it's July 4th, you can't forget the anniversary. And then we flew to Europe. We took all our money. And our wedding money, and we flew to Europe, and we did Europe on $5 a day per person, and had 8.5 weeks doing it all around Europe. It was quite wonderful.
So you get fireworks on your anniversary every year.
Right, the country celebrates it.
That's right. So you mentioned that this, pretty profound transition you had in early 60s. Stan got a job in Washington working for a member of Congress, I understand. And
he was the most liberal member of Congress.
Right.
William Fitzryan, he represented the West Side. I worked in that campaign. I worked in a lot of campaigns going door to door.
And Stan was the head of the campaign, right?
Yes, he ran he was the campaign manager, and he's great at it.
Okay.
He also ran, Bill Ryan did run for mayor just about the time I was getting my doctorate finished up. And so he actually moved to New York during that period while I finished up my PhD.
Right.
And after that, I won an award for my august achievement of the PhD. So he got a grant for the American Political Science Association to study housing and urban affairs in England. And then we extended it to Scandinavia.
Right. But before we get to that, just tell us a little bit about how you, what that transition was like. You said, I was a confirmed New Yorker. New York was my whole life. And you had to go to this place called Washington, D.C., and you had a lot of trepidation about it, right?
Oh, yes. I cried.
Yeah. But it worked out. I mean, and in a short
That's
while,
right.
it sounds like you became accustomed and, began to like it, right?
Oh, yes. I liked it after a few months. It's totally different. I never had a dishwasher before. I didn't have a car, and just driving. It's kind of, life is simpler. But every time we go back to New York, I always wonder, what if we had gone back? But here, here's a whole community that I wouldn't have had if we moved back.
Right. And so, and just to restate what you said before, you came back, you finished up that PhD program at University of Maryland. You were at some other research or psychology research institutes here in DC.
Well, I worked at NIH in the adult psychiatry branch at one point in the research department. I also took an externship and an internship at St. Elizabeth's Hospitals as part of the program.
Anything about that?
And then I worked at Area C Community Mental Health Center for about 3 years. There was a Black group that formed because there were terrible things, and Blacks have been treated terribly. And I kind of tried to join the group, but they wouldn't let me in. And they said, if I really care, I should work in the suburbs and convert people to understand more about what Blacks suffer with. And it was a terrible time at Area C Communal Mental Health Center. And the head of this group actually caused a lot of damage. There were bomb threats that went on. The head of the psychology department, her husband was sent a funeral bouquet in honor of her demise. So, it was terrible. So I ended up working at Community Psychiatric Clinic in Bethesda, where I met Lisa Maxstein.
Right. And then also around this time, this is mid 60s-ish, you had children. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, I had Jordana in 1967 and Bobby in 1970, and giving birth is the incredible high in life. And I got also, later on, I got to see the birth of one of Jordana's kids and one of Bobby's kids. And to watch the delivery is also a high. That fantastic.
It's a little easier than giving the delivery.
That's right. It was,
yeah.
Isn't it? Giving birth is totally incredible. And raising kids is totally incredible. So what happened is my parents were very hard workers. They worked, not only did they work 5 days a week, they also worked on the weekends. And being an only child, I was alone a lot. And so I decided there was no way I was going to have only one kid. I had to have 2 kids, and I worked part-time. So I combined being with the family, with working part-time. And then when Stan was in the Nixon administration, well, he was working at HUD when Nixon took over, but the people in the Nixon administration were as horrendous as the people in the Trump administration. They were probably a little brighter. I mean, people in the Trump administration are just plain dumb as well as evil. The people in the Nixon administration were just evil. And so he got a job working in New York for 3 years. Actually during that time, Trump offered him a job, but he knew better than to work for Trump. This was the early 70s. So during that period, I would see patients at night. I'd put the kids to bed, and then I'd have patients at 8:30 and 9:30, Monday through Thursday. But after 3 years of his working in New York, he would commute. He would be in New York Monday to Friday, and then he'd come down on Friday back to Washington, and then Monday he'd go back. So we had a commuter marriage during that period of time.
So not an easy juggle for you, right?
No, but I didn't want to give up working. I didn't want to move back to New York. I mean, I had the opportunity, he said, we could move back to New York, but at that point I was a confirmed Washingtonian. So I chose to stay. So after 3 years, when it looked like the Democrats would come in and Carter would be the president, he came back and we continued our life together.
You also said to me that when, and I'm quoting here, when we came to Washington and we had young kids, the kids had to go to Hebrew school, and we joined Tifereth Israel. And you said, and this is a quote, "I kind of grew up Jewishly there." Can you say something about that? Well,
Although my parents felt very Jewish, all their friends were Jewish. They were never members of a synagogue, nor were my parents' friends members of a synagogue. I got to go to Sunday school for a short period of time at Temple Emmanuel, which is like the Church of Judaism. It's a big kind of wealthy temple. I had a scholarship, but I didn't. I wasn't there very long, and so I didn't have any Jewish. I had very little Jewish education, and so being in Tifereth Israel, I was able to learn more about Judaism. But I still, I don't know as much as I wish I did, and my Hebrew isn't wonderful. And you just make choices in life and what you put your emphasis on. And I've been so busy. My life is incredibly hectic. I still see patients with the family. I work out about 5 times a week. Mm-hmm. I deal with finances. I do cooking. I have a nice garden. It's a very busy life.
So going back to Tifereth Israel, there was an incident there that you were very closely involved in, and was kind of a memorable moment.
Yeah, that was really very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rabbi decided that the head of our office, our administrative head of the synagogue, could no longer be on the bima. She could not read from the Torah. She couldn't be on the bima because it came out that she was gay. I mean, he knew she was gay, but somehow I think it came out in the blade that she was gay, and I was fit to be tied. I was furious, but I knew that if I fought the rabbi directly, just me, it wouldn't work. I wouldn't get anywhere with the rabbi. So I got up a letter, which I circulated, and I got 49 members to sign. And let me tell you, getting 49 people, Jewish intelligent people, to agree on the wording of a letter is no easy task. But somehow got 49 signatures, which went to and we sent it off to the rabbi. And then I set up varying meetings. We had 3 meetings. I made a presentation at one. I put articles in relation to gay and Judaism in the hall. He actually, of the hall of the synagogue, and one of them was by a rabbi that was a friend of his, and he took it out of the hall. I was furious. And then we got up a letter. I got up a letter with the help of others that went to the Rabbinical Assembly. And we got, in our synagogue, we got 132 signatures, which is pretty good. And we sent the letter to the Rabbinical Assembly, saying that, that they should not be discriminating against gay people. And, to call that a sin was just totally ridiculous. Had a better wording, of course. Anyway, they did not respond to us. They responded to our rabbi, and their letter was basically, we haven't yet decided what to do with it, what to do about this. And this is 1988. And then they said the principle of morei d'artra applies. Morei d'artra means the rabbi decides, essentially. And so he wouldn't decide to let Beth back on the bima. And the only response was for us to leave. And then a whole group of us did leave to Fereth Israel. I think more people went to Addis, but George Dreesen and Susan told us we should join Adat Shalom, which was just beginning at that time. I think it was like 1988, 1987. It was the first 6 months of our synagogue. And so we joined, and it actually was a hard transition for me because we'd been into Fereth Israel for many years and we had loads of friends. And so leaving was very difficult, but Adat Shalom has turned out wonderfully. And as you know, Stan was president for 3 years during the building of our building. And so it's been our home.
Right. And Carol or Mim, I'm not sure which, says Beth Cohen, who's the woman you're speaking of.
Right, it's Beth.
Interviewed to the Jewish Week talking about a convention of the International Association of Gay and Lesbian Jews, and Buddy Abramowitz, the rabbi at the time, flipped out about it, is what she says. And she is now, I think you told me she is now a rabbi, right?
Yeah, I believe she trained with Rachel. So, small world. And she became the rabbi, the congressional leader of Seaside Synagogue in Rehoboth, which we have also joined.
Okay. And we mentioned Jordana and Bobby. Can you say a word or two about what they're up to in life?
Oh, well, Stan told them they could choose whatever they wanted to do in life. He just wanted to choose what kind of work they did, who they married, and where they lived. And so,
other than that, it was okay.
Other than that, they were free to choose whatever.
Right.
We are very lucky that they chose to live in Washington. And Jordana is a member of Beth Shalom. Bobby is a member of Adat Shalom. And we get to see them a lot. And we even managed Passover Seders this year with them, given that most of us have had shots.
And Jordana is a teacher.
Yes. Well, she got a master's at Sciences Po in Paris. And she was going to be an international business, which is what her degree is in, but she decided she'd rather be a teacher. So she teaches high school in Montgomery County. Mm-hmm. And Bobby went to law school. He actually had a clerkship in Hawaii, which was rather nice. And he's a partner at Covington.
Good. The music part of your life has continued. You've been a member of a lot of different.
Yeah, well, when we lived in England, I joined the London Repertory Orchestra. But when the kids were young, it was too hard to play the cello, practice the cello. I did some piano then, and I did some piano when I was getting my doctorate. But I went back to cello, and then I joined the NIH orchestra, and I was there for a few years. And then I switched orchestras, and I joined the Symphony of the Potomac, which I love. Unfortunately, we can't play together during COVID. Right. So I really miss it, because playing in an orchestra is fantastic. It's a different experience than listening in a concert hall, because the music surrounds you, and as you work on all these pieces, you get to know what the other people are playing, which parts are solo, which are accompaniment, and it's fantastic. But I also play string quartets. Not enough. I haven't been playing recently, but I've managed to
I managed to play most of the famous quartets of the composers, and I've played most of the well-known symphonies of the well-known composers. I was able to perform with my 2 orchestras.
And when you're coming up on a performance of one of these symphonies, about how much time do you have to put into it other than, rehearsal time with the symphony?
Oh God, there's a lot
practicing at home a lot?
Oh yes, you really have to practice hard. And what I also do is I usually have a recording, but like a CD, and I play the part with the CD, so I get the feel for it, and I know the tempo. But it's a lot of hard work. When I joined the orchestra, I didn't realize how much time it would take, but it takes a lot of time. I mean, the symphonies are very difficult. As I said, I played most of Beethoven symphonies, Brahms, Mendelssohn, Mozart, a bunch of Haydn symphonies, Shostakovich, and concertos. We did a lot. We have a lot of soloists, so I've done a lot of concertos, and it's quite wonderful to be in the orchestra and have it all around you.
Well, hopefully you'll be back to that sometime soon. You're also a very busy gardener, right?
Yeah, well, not at this point, but I have planted the garden so that there are generally flowers from March to November.
Mm-hmm.
But now I don't have the energy, and I needed 2 knee replacements, and the result is that I can't really kneel, so it makes gardening a bit hard.
And you're also into photography.
Yes, we've done a lot of traveling, and I've got a lot of pictures that I took, which I got about 35 in the powder room and about, I don't know, maybe 30 in the hall, and they're pretty good.
Good.
I love looking at them.
And that's something you can still do even now during the lockdown. I don't know, have you had a lot of opportunity to shoot?
Yeah, we spent we had about 18 summer vacations in Aspen, attending the Aspen Music Festival, and that certainly broadened my my music knowledge. That was just fantastic, going to the Aspen Music Festival.
Right. And you mentioned sort of in the context of that controversy at Tifereth Israel, you said, I'm a fighter and believe you have to fight for things. And you also said that in the context of you've been involved in campaigning for political candidates and that sort of thing.
Yeah, starting in 90s, let's see, after I graduated college and got married and Stan got involved in politics, I got involved in a lot of political campaigns, going door to door in New York. And then I got involved I went door to door for Obama in Virginia Beach. I got involved in Washington, D.C. campaigns for Walter Fauntleroy and Marion Barry. So I've done a lot of door to door, and I did a little PR also for.
So it sounds like you've had mostly winners.
Yes.
Good. Well, maybe you're
except
the
for the last
touch.
one.
Why don't we take? I'm open to some questions from the group if you want to put them into the chat. I think this is from Mim. Carol must have skipped elementary school. We are 9 months apart in age, but we were actually 2 years apart at music and art. We were both in the senior orchestra in the spring of 1954. And she says, yes, she shared a stand with my cousin Paula. So that's interesting. And this High School of Music and Art you mentioned to me is now what's known as the High School for Performing Arts, which was, became famous with the movie Fame, and is well known as a sort of a place that generates some great talent. So
it was a highlight. I can tell you, music and art was a highlight for all of us who went, an absolute highlight.
Yeah.
More so than college in a way.
Yeah, sounds fun. Stan,
Well, I can
know
say
we can't hold you back, but is there anything anything you can say in
oh yeah, I always
a
have
couple of
saying.
minutes about your wife?
Yeah, well, I was summing it up in a couple of minutes. It's difficult, but I'll try. Anyway, I've always said that my greatest talent was marrying Carol, and you can see why. I mean, she's a woman of a spectacular amount of talent. It's hard to even say sum it up. She also could be a good artist, but she hasn't had time to do that. But when she had done it, she's very good. She's a very creative person, but more important than that, she's a very moral person. And also, what I find of the many attractions is her fierce sense of injustice, which I find is one of the fundamental sort of the fundamental values of people, if they have a sense of injustice. And she has a fierce sense of injustice, and as she said, she's a fighter. And I mean, even when she was a young woman of 21, she took on the Internal Revenue Service in a fight and actually won it, which I think was pretty amazing. But as you see, she fought for gay rights, she's fought for civil rights, she's fought for women's rights. She was active in the women's movement, which we can get into. But
I set up consciousness raising groups also for now, in the early 70s.
Yeah, so she's been just an amazing life mate. I mean, I couldn't possibly imagine doing what we've done without her. I mean, she's as I say, she's a really Wonder Woman. I think for her 83rd birthday, I should give her a pair of bracelets
and a cape.
And a cape, right? Yeah, I mean, she's just been great. I mean, and she's also a very loving mother and wife and grandmother. So she's full of compassion for everybody, and it really is, I think, an example of how one should live a moral and decent life.
Well, speaking of being a mother, I wonder, and again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if Bobby and Jordana would like to pop in and say a word or
Sure,
two.
I can say I'm Jordana, her daughter. Actually, I'm impressed, having known a lot about what my mom said. I'm actually impressed listening. It sounds like I'm listening for the first time, but I actually didn't realize, in terms of all of her work with organizations and what happened at TI. I just knew that my parents left TI because of the incident, but I didn't realize that my mom had all this organizing and letters and campaigning around it. I didn't know that part of that. But I just want to say that I think of my mom, like, two words that would come to mind are caring and hardworking. My mom has always been hardworking in everything she does. And as you can see, it's not just her working as a psychologist, but also all of the political work she's done. Her cello has been a big part of her life, her concerts, gardening, photography. Every time we went on a trip, my mom would be taking pictures. But she used to have this huge lens. It was like 12 inches or something. And she'd have this huge lens and all these different lenses to carry around when we were traveling to take all these amazing pictures. But I actually think in myself, my political spark and my choice of being a teacher comes from my mom's caring and working with others. One memory I have that I'm so grateful for growing up in Washington, D.C. is going to the ERA march. I remember going with my mom, in the 70s, we went to the ERA march. And I think my wanting to help out politically and help with social justice comes from my mom and my dad. And my mom has been very independent and ahead of her time. My mom, this is kind of personal, but she breastfed both my brother and I, and a lot of kids at that time it was not in style. And I feel like she knew that was good for us. Like, she would do all this research and know what the newest research was. So then when I was feeding my children, she was a big proponent and very helpful in that respect. So those are a couple tidbits. I mean, I could talk on and on, like my dad said, but
Good.
I'll let my brother chime in.
Good, thank you. And before we get to him, I just want to clear up, we need a correction here that the High School for Performing Arts is now the LaGuardia School for Art.
Well, it's combined, the Music and Art and Performing Arts High School united, and now it's called the LaGuardia School of the Arts.
Okay.
And
but
it's
I
down, it
digress.
moved. We had a gorgeous building near City College, and now it's in Lincoln Center, which is a good location, but the building is ugly.
Yeah. So thank you, Jordana. Bobby, if you can chime in here.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm delighted to. This is a wonderful celebration of my mother. I think, growing up with my mother, I think it's pretty clear one of the great values is the power of example. It wasn't just what she told us, but how she acted imparted tremendous values that you can clearly see come through in terms of speaking up for what's right, and being straightforward and honest. One story that she told me once that I think captures one other element of my mother, which is that when she was young and she first took a long train trip, I think it was to the Midwest, and she said she just stayed up all night looking out the window because she didn't want to miss anything. And to me, that captured another value, which is wonderment, just the sheer joy of what's around us. My mother is not one to just sit back and be idle, as you can tell. And she's always looking for new experiences, new understandings of the world. And I think that she imparted that to us as well. So I'm very thankful also for this event to that my daughters who are behind me can hear more about their grandmother. I'm sure they learned just from this event. And she continues to be a great, model and example for the family.
Yeah, and if you give her a little bit more time than we have here, you'll hear a whole lot more detail. I'm sorry that we couldn't get into that, but thank you, Bobby, for that. It's very nice.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else go ahead. Something else you want to add? Or?
No, I was just thanking you for doing this.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Carol from anyone in the group? And Carol, there is a question that I've been asking everyone who has done this, and we really appreciate your participation in it. And it's a little tricky to talk about yourself in this kind of a setting, but hopefully it's been a good experience for you, as it has been for us. But tell us a little bit about what is it that you, at this point in your life, have learned that you wish you had known earlier, or that you would teach your younger self?
Well, I've always had regrets that I didn't find out more about my family's background before, and it's too late now. I don't know anything about my a lot of my family, my family's background, and so I have regrets about that. I learned a lot of things from my parents, and that's kept me in good stead. I mean, one of the big things, they were very hardworking, so it's a pattern in the family. I am, Santa is, and the kids are. And I've learned a lot about discipline and how important discipline is, and also how important it is to be active and to fight for what you believe, and not wait for things to happen, or not to postpone. And so to be really active in your life. I mean, the things that I've learned way back, so I'm not saying it's new. I encourage people having fun. I do that with my patients. Sometimes I'll make it a little assignment, a prescription, that they should have some fun, because it's very easy to caught up in life and not have some balance in life. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's excellent. And how have you and Stan been sort of coping with the pandemic moment? And how is that? Hopefully you've been vaccinated.
We have been
close to.
Yes, we have been so busy. We are taking so many classes, not only at Adat Shalom, but we also take 2 classes a week from Rabbi Shmuel Herzfeld of Ohev Shalom, which, on the Torah and the Talmud, and that's been wonderful. And we've been in book groups, and we take 4 classes at Ali. It's like I went back to school, and this year I took 4 classes in the fall, and I've taken 4 classes. I'm in 4 classes now, and they're absolutely wonderful. So it's very broadening. But my main problem is I don't have enough downtime. I mean, I'm just so busy with one thing or another. And I love the classes. I wish I had more time to read. I wish I had more time to practice the cello. There's a limit to the time. I felt guilty that I didn't spend more time helping out at Adat Shalom. I'm very grateful to those who do. But my schedule is such that I end up working morning, noon, and night most days of the week. And even on the weekends, I'm doing work of one sort or another. And that's not good. And so my goal is to have some more downtime and to be able to have more relaxed time and be able to do more reading.
Well, may it be so, and may your garden, which I assume is blooming or sprouting now, may
Wonderful daffodils now. I've got
Good.
hundreds.
And you mentioned to me that one of the battles that you have every year is with the deer from the park who come and eat all of your wonderful plants. So may you get to it before they do. Good luck with that. So thank you, Carol, for sharing all this with us. And thanks to I think we had something like 75 screens or more, 80 screens of people who tuned into this. Thanks everybody for doing this. Thanks to Audrey Lyon for her coordination, to Rabbi Rachel for her inspiration on this. And thank you, Bobby and Jordana, for pitching in. And of course, Stan, thank you for bringing her to Washington, D.C. that made a difference for all of us here too. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you and Audrey and Rachel.
And Fred.
And Fred.
Very good. So I think that brings us to the end of this. If there are any closing statements, Rachel, that you have, or anything else we need to say.
Just want to say thank you, Carol. What an amazing experience just to get to listen to you talk about the journey you've been on. Many of us have known you for many years and have known little bits and pieces of this, but it is really something to get the fuller picture and to see how it continues to evolve forward with a lot of vitality and creativity and passion. So what a inspiration for all of the rest of us.
Thank
and
you.
I want to say thank you to you, Jeff, for taking us through a whole season here with so much grace and intelligence. And you may want to think about a career change here.
I'm having a good time.
No pressure, but
so thank you so much. And any announcements or other?
Yeah, I just want to remind people about tomorrow, as we mentioned, the Yom HaShoah commemoration for the wider community that is sponsored by the JCRC. We've shared about that in our social solidarity blasts, and also again Claude Caxter, who's been an important spokesperson on this piece of this facet of Jewish life, has reminded us. So encourage people to tune in. And then next Shabbat, Friday night, the 16th, we have a special family Shabbat, which will also be kind of keyed to the key of Israel, to celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut. Everyone is invited, all ages. And then Shabbat morning, as Rabbi Fred mentioned, we have the next opportunity to welcome Micah Hendler, who's been our guest musician this year. This coming Shabbat, a week from today, Micah and I and Cheryl Hurwitz, and I think maybe one other person, are going to be at the synagogue, leading from the synagogue, and we're looking forward to that, to be able to harmonize a bit and to create some music together. So just mentioning that, I hope people will tune in. I have a bit of challah here. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
One quick thing. We haven't mentioned that today is the 13th day of the Omer. We're in the season of sacred counting. Mm-hmm. And when we think about time, here the Omer, the 7-week march from Passover to Shavuot with intentionality, we also step back and think in annual terms. The closures came 13 and a half months ago, just as the Honoring Our Elders began of last year. And it was proof of concept, in a way, with the incredible help of Audrey and Jeff and Mark Gunther, to see the ways that we can stay connected and share our stories. And this has been a lifeline. And the idea that we just closed our second annual COVID series of honoring our elders is staggering. But we also have so much to celebrate. So step back and think about celebrating each day on its own, but also this march of seasons and the ways that some of the best of what we stand for has been able to endure for over a year, even as we look forward to coming back together. And Carol, thank you for being the amazing exclamation point at the end of this sacred series. Shalom, everyone.
Here, here. Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Okay, so
Thank you.
Motzi, so we can have
Thank you.
everyone join me, please. Baruch atah Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu melech
Eloheinu melech
haolam,
haolam,
hamotzi
hamotzi
lechem
lechem
min
min
haaretz b'te'avon. B'te'avon, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Be well, stay well.
Matt, can you
Yeah.
turn off YouTube?
Probably. Here we go. Good idea.